Hey everybody, welcome to our channel. I'm Jason.
I'm Christina.
And we are Alexandria Honey Company. So today we wanted to bring you a video on the top 5 things to consider if you want to become a beekeeper. But before we jump in, a little bit about us. We started keeping bees, it'll be 5 years this spring here coming up. We started with just one hive, and as of this past summer, we were carrying anywhere from 12 to 14 hives in our backyard here just on the outside of Washington, D.C. And we overwintered with 7 hives, and we lost one, so we had a dead out a few weeks ago during a particularly hard cold snap. So we have 6 hives out there now. They're doing well, and looking forward definitely to the upcoming beekeeping season. It's been a long kind of cold winter and the days are getting longer, the bees are out, so we're excited to get started. So today we just wanted to bring you a quick video on, like I said, top 5 things to consider if you're thinking about becoming a beekeeper. And these are just a couple ideas. We're just putting out some additional data points for people maybe thinking about getting into beekeeping as a hobby. And so we thought, we had a few things that really stood out in our mind that we wish we would have known. Maybe going into this, I don't know that it would have necessarily changed our opinion or mind, but would have been definitely some things that would have been helpful to have been able to better plan for. So with that, number 1.
Yeah, so I was the one who initially got us into beekeeping, and I had this vision in my head of what beekeeping would be like. I'd have my cute little hive in the backyard, we painted it yellow, we'd sit there and be pretty and pollinate our flowers, and we'd take honey every once in a while. And the reality is not quite so idyllic. It's still a lot of fun, but it's just a lot more work. So we're sharing just some of our experience. So the first thing that caught me off guard, I signed up for a bee class, and when I got there, they handed us a sheet that laid out everything you'd need, and I was shocked at the cost. So beekeeping is, as far as hobbies go, relatively expensive, at least up front. So just to give you an idea, to get yourself a hive kit, which is basically everything you need, a few boxes, the cover, the bottom board, that's going to run you about $200 for one hive. To put bees in that hive, in this area, Northern Virginia, a nuke or nucleus colony of bees to get you started is also going to run you about $200. And then you need just some basic equipment, some protective wear, at least a veil, some gloves, maybe you want a jacket or a suit. You'll need a smoker, a bee brush, just some basic things. That's also, if you try to stick to a budget, would be about at least $100. So right there for one hive, you're looking at about a $500 investment, plus the cost of your bee class, which you're hopefully taking, which we'll get to in a minute. And then, double that basically if you want to do 2 hives, which we'll also talk about. So depending on how you start 1 to 2 hives, you're looking at about $500 to $1,000 just to get started with your bees.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, there's lots of, these are just ballpark calculations, but fairly, I think, reliable. I mean, obviously you could look for secondhand, maybe you join a local bee club and somebody has some secondhand equipment. So there's ways to potentially get that cost down some. These are just kind of numbers starting from, like, if you are jumping into this and you're really excited and you go on to one of the major beekeeping supply websites and order yourself a kit that's already kind of assembled for you, and all you have to do is maybe put some boxes together and paint them type of thing. And the costs certainly go up from there. These were kind of more on the lower end of what you're going to probably be looking at spending. So number 2 we want to talk about is the number of hives. So our bee mentor that we got linked up with through the bee class, and through the bee class as well, they always were saying, you should always start with 2 hives. You should always start with 2 hives. Again, it came back to cost for us. We were looking at dropping $500, $600, $700 to get this hobby started for something that we weren't sure where it was going to go. Christina was also very pregnant at the time, and we were a little worried about, the amount of work and so forth. So we started with 1. We kind of tossed away all of the sage advice from the elder beekeepers and went with 1. And You know, that kind of came back to bite us because we lost that hive over our first winter. They did really well throughout the spring and the summer. We raised them up to a good population, and when we came out in the following spring, they were all gone, which was really unfortunate. And
so we just started again.
yeah, so we had to
And
start
buy
again
more bees
and
for
buy more
$200.
bees. And we had two hives, you know, there's a good chance that one of the two would have potentially made it, and we wouldn't have been starting from scratch again. And that puts you behind a whole nother year because when you buy a package of bees and you raise them up, you're not going to be taking honey from that hive your first year. You need to build that colony up. They need to put up enough food to survive the winter. So there's really nothing there for the beekeeper or yourselves to take. So if we would have had those two hives, we would have been in a much better position coming out of that winter instead of we had to start over. We bought two hives the next time around, more equipment, and so definitely consider number of hives. I know it can be a bit intimidating jumping in and getting these two sets of bees, but there really are good advantages to it.
And on the other side of that, I would say don't get too enthusiastic with the number of hives. I think starting slow is probably a good way to go.
Oh, absolutely.
And bees multiply very quickly, so if both your hives make it through winter, you may very well find yourself with 4 or 5 hives in the spring, just from normal bee multiplication.
Yeah, so 2 really is a good starting number.
So then the next thing to consider is location. You want a fairly sunny spot for your hive. Obviously, you're going to, especially morning sun, I should say.
Yeah.
Some shade is okay. We have noticed that our hives that are in slightly shadier locations tend to have a bit more trouble with pests, specifically small hive beetles.
Yeah.
That's something we've overcome though. So you can make most situations work, but you are going to be looking for a sunny spot. So it's probably something south or east facing. You're obviously not going to want it right next to your patio where you like to sit and drink your morning coffee. The bees, their flight path, they'll fly out of the hive and then up. And so you need to allow some leeway for that. So you're going to want to move the hives, or at least point them away from where people are walking, where your kids are playing, where your pets are running. Just things to think about. Your hive's going to need to be fairly level. So if your ground isn't level, you're going to need to have some kind of structure to level it out. So these are all things that can be overcome. We were surprised though just how tricky it can be to find a good spot. So just to tell you about our property, our house is south facing and we have a good sized front yard and it gets full sun. Be perfect for beehive, except that's where the kids play, that's where the neighborhood kids play, that's where we spend all our time. We don't want to put a beehive in the front of our house. And the back of our house is surrounded by trees, so we were really trying to wedge the hives in, and we found a good compromise that we'll tell you about another time, but and it also involved getting some trees removed. So just take a look around your property and make sure that you have a nice space. And this is definitely something that you can talk over with your mentor or more experienced beekeepers, but just keep that in mind as you're looking around. If the spot that you have in mind, does it get sun? Is it out of the way? Are people gonna accidentally walk in front of it? So just things to consider when you think about placement.
And this is where our bee mentor was invaluable because Christina and I thought we had the perfect spot picked out until he came over and pointed us about 20 feet to the left and said, no, actually this would be the better spot. So again, that's where that wisdom, leaning on more experienced beekeepers to come check your spot out where you're thinking it might be good and get their opinion, get a second opinion from someone that keeps bees is always helpful if you can. But yeah, like Christina said, you know, location is important. Somewhere comfortable, somewhere that you can access easily, somewhere that you can walk to and walk comfortably to and from. You know, beekeeping can be heavy at different times of the year. So somewhere that's safe, that you're going to have sure footing, and not going to be trying to, you know, and we'll definitely get into this more in a different video, but we started off on a hill, so not necessarily the best beekeeping spot.
Well, it was fine when we just had 1 or 2, but as we started to expand, it just wasn't practical.
We 1 or 2 was fine up on the hill, but as we grew, man, it just got really tight, really hard to work, especially with 2 people. When I first set up our location, Christina was the beekeeper. I had nothing to do with the bees. I stood in the window and took notes for her. Yeah, I was the equipment manager. I built the boxes, I painted them, I made sure she had everything she needed, but I didn't deal with the bees, and I've since gotten very involved with the bees. So the spot that I built for her was really just perfect for 1 person. Okay, so So number 4, workload. Beekeeping can be a lot of work, especially as a hobbyist, which we are. And this is a hobby. This is not our full-time job. We both have full-time jobs. We have kids. We have a dog. We have an active lifestyle. So beekeeping for us is a hobby. And it can be a lot of work, even when you just have maybe your first 2 hives going. Your first year, not too bad, because those are going to be smaller colonies building up, and then you'll roll into the fall and winter. But when you're when you're into it, especially that second year, you've got these 2 hives. Hopefully they've made it and they're booming. And we can kind of break it down by season. So starting in the spring, it's a busy time for a beekeeper.
March and April around here.
So March and April. So we're just coming
starting,
into that. We're towards the tail end of February right now, when we're making this video. So we're just starting to edge into the beginning of our beekeeping season. So I think that spring period is really when work starts to ramp up. We haven't hit that point yet, but it won't be uncommon for us to be doing weekly hive inspections. Every Saturday, Sunday, we try to get out there and take a look at the hives and see how everybody's doing. And that can take, like I said earlier, last season during the peak of summer, we were carrying 12 to 14 hives. That's a lot of work. That can take, even us dividing and conquering the hives. I mean, we can easily be out there for 2 hours, going through the hives, and working them. And so I would say spring into summer is a good deal of work. And then around here we hit our honey harvest season around July 4th is a good rule of thumb, give or take a week or 2. And kind of when you get through honey harvest and you cruise into the dog days of summer, it slows down. Yeah, it slows down. You're not in there. We're not in there every weekend. That's kind of the time period for a beekeeper that you're doing a lot of mite. You're doing a lot of varroa mite inspections, potentially treatment. But other than kind of focusing on the kind of the looking out for mites and other things, it's kind of a little bit slower part of the season. And then as you move into fall, is really when you're thinking about making sure that you're getting the bees ready for winter. So you're checking food stores, potentially feeding them, sugar syrup, and maybe doing some condensing. We did a lot of that last year. As I said, at our peak we were 12 to 14, and then we went into winter with 7. So we condensed them down. So again, not too terribly amount of too much work, but there's definitely not every weekend, but every week and a half, 2 weeks definitely. And then you hit winter, and around here, not much to do. I mean, that's kind of when you're going to be doing your housekeeping, maybe equipment repairs, equipment cleaning, maybe painting up some boxes for the next season. But again, when you're kind of in that, starting in March, April, May, June, July, those can be some pretty heavy workload months where you're going to have several hours a week that you're out there working with the bees. Obviously, part of that season is very hot. We do wear protective equipment, and that can, that adds to that kind of being hot, and beekeeping can be heavy.
A lot of manual labor. The honey soup, a full medium honey super like we use, can weigh 50 or 60 pounds. And that's just one box. And you're going to have several of those on a hive, and you're picking them up and putting them back on. So something to consider. It's a lot of work. It's just physical. I don't just mean it's physical work. It's physical,
but there's a I would say there's a good mental component, because we spend time before we go out kind of coming up with a game plan and kind of like who's doing what and kind of what our goal is for each hive and what we're looking for and what we're doing. So you have that kind of mental preparation, but then when you get out there, you add that physical component, and you're looking for your queens, and you're looking for certain things, and then the bees, they don't read the handbook like you do. So you could have the best plans and go out there, and they're doing something you've never seen before. So then that mental component comes in where you're like, they're throwing you for a curveball. You're kind of thinking about what your next move is. So again, workload. Definitely give it a consideration when you're thinking about becoming a beekeeper, to make sure that you can carve the space and the time out in your life to take care of the bees.
And not to freak anybody out, this is obviously scalable. So if you have 2 hives, it takes a lot less time than if you have 10 hives. So
absolutely.
Okay, so then the final thing we really wanted to emphasize is that you should 100% take a class.
Yeah.
There are lots of ways you can take a class. I see so many advertisements online for online classes, but if at all possible, I would say get linked up with your local bee club and take their class. Now, a lot of those are going to be online these days anyways, but I know our club is trying to do a practical hands-on component at the end, which I highly recommend. We picked up our bees, never having touched a hive before. So if you can get any hands-on experience before then, highly recommend it.
Absolutely.
But also, why local is so important is it helps you build relationships with other beekeepers. And beekeeping is a very local activity in terms of weather, climate, what to expect in your specific area. So meeting other beekeepers who are dealing with the same conditions,
invaluable.
Highly recommend.
Invaluable.
And the other thing is, I know at least our club, if you go through their course, they will find you a mentor within the club. And they only do that if you are a member of the club and if you take the class. So otherwise, there are a lot of Facebook groups and other online resources, or maybe you know someone. You might be able to find someone to help you. I mean, beekeepers are generally a pretty giving community. But nonetheless, I strongly encourage you to A, take a class, and B, make that a local class, if at all possible. And then something to consider along with that, just thinking about the locality of beekeeping, make sure it's legal to keep bees in your area. And what
restrictions
there might be around that. So here in the city of Alexandria, there really aren't any restrictions, which is why, you know, we're able just to use our good sense as far as how many hives we can carry on our property. But if we live just a couple of streets over in Fairfax County, we would be much more restricted in terms of how many hives we can. I can't remember what the exact.
It's 4 or 5, maybe.
4 or 5.
Something like that.
If you have up to an acre of property, I think you're allowed to have 4, and then you need a lot more property to add hives beyond that. So just take a look at the local laws. That's something else that, again, being involved with a local class, a local club, a local mentor, they can help you navigate those situations.
There's so much to learn, and you know, we've leaned on our mentor many times, especially early on. Panicked phone calls, we can't find the queen, or we don't know what they're doing, or is this a swarm? Like our first swarm, we filmed the clip, sent it to our mentor, like, is this a swarm? He's like, yep, stand back and enjoy. So having that mentor, that person that you can fall back on for questions like, hey, when is the nectar flow around here? What kind of plants and trees are my bees probably going to be, you know, attracted to? Like, there's so much knowledge that you can gain from somebody locally, and that's going to be unique to your area. So definitely, you know, if you're going to go the online route, do your research, do your homework, try to find a good program. But like Christina said, definitely encourage the local class, local beekeeping community. If you can tap into one, I think is definitely the way to go.
And we say all of this not to scare you. Beekeeping is a wonderful, fun hobby. And if we had overthought it, we might not have done it. So if you want to do it, go for it.
Go for it,
But just before you buy those bees, before you sign up for some class taught by someone on the other side of the country, just think through some of these things. Think about where you're going to put your hive so you have some idea going into it. But have fun. It's an amazing experience. Honeybees are absolutely fascinating. So fascinating. You'll learn so much. And it never gets old, because I don't know that you can ever know everything there is to know. You'll never be an expert. So every year it's different. The weather's different. The bees are different. You're always learning.
You're always learning. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the video, please hit that like and subscribe button. And we'll be back very soon with another video. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.